So we'll be recording these. These will be available for a year on the Whova site. So if you have to leave for any reason, or you're like, man, this is a great, program, people need to hear this, go back and listen. So I'm excited that I get to go back and listen to all these videos over the next year and just kind of continue that. So that's one of those things that at conference, sometimes like, oh, I kind of want to go to both sessions at this time. And now you can just choose one to go to and then you can listen to the other one later. So this one is telemetry in the outdoor education. So we're kind of excited about that. It is part of the non-formal educator track. So before we get started, we just once again want to give a thank you to our sponsors for NIPSCO, Mary Lee Environmental Center, and NAAEE for sponsoring the conference. So today we have two great speakers with us. Tom McConnell is a professor of science education in the development of biology, Ball State University. His work includes teacher professional development through the Conservation Educator Academy at the Indianapolis Zoo. And he is the author-director of the Conservation Tales series of books for young readers. And then Erica Forstater, is that how you pronounce it?
You got it.
They've spent the last 2.5 years working at Ball State as the environmental education and orchid greenhouse assistant for the BSU Field Station and Environmental Education Center. She works primarily with the local community and with pre-K through 12 grade groups who visit us virtually and in person to learn about habitats in Indiana, wildlife, and more. Before working here, she earned her MS in biology from BGSU, focusing on invasive wetland ecology, and her BS in environmental science from Cornell University with a minor in education. That actually sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh, I miss it.
That sounds fantastic. So just during this thing, just a reminder, if you're not one of the presenters, just while they're presenting, to keep yourself on mute. They will be screen sharing throughout this, but you can keep chats going in Zoom. We'll also be monitoring the chat on the Whova page. So if you're using Zoom or Whova, we'll be monitoring the chat features in either one of those. Though they may ask for times for you guys to participate, for just time to take you off mute and just answer questions. There's not tons of us in here, so don't worry about, if you have a question, just ask it. Not a huge deal. We're gonna leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions and sharing, and then we'll help you, give you some reminders of what's next. So I'm gonna turn it over to Tom and Erica at this time, and I look forward to hearing what you have to present.
Fantastic, thanks. If you're not already in the chat window, make sure to click open the chat window, leave an introduction for yourself, and if you have any questions at all, let us know. Jessica and Erica and I will all be watching that chat window to see if there's some questions that pop in. And hopefully we'll leave more than that 10 minutes for some discussion time, because that's the good stuff, I think. This presentation was supposed to be a 3-hour workshop at Camp Mac, and we were ready to go with that, and then found out just days before Erica and I did a summer teacher workshop that's not going to happen. So we've got some video of what our activity is that we'll show later on, but what we'd like to share with you is some ideas on how to video telemetry that you may be familiar with for tracking wildlife, as a way to help teach some of the authentic science practices that we want to demonstrate to learners at whatever setting you're doing environmental education in. Part of the reason for this and the philosophy behind it, I've got this phrase I use with my Conservation Tales group when we're working on our books, that if we want children to think like scientists, we need to have children do what scientists do. And I think that thinking like a scientist is something we really need to help teach right now. There's way too much distrust of science. We've seen it throughout the election cycle, and I think probably everybody here agrees with me that teaching students to understand science is likely a way to help them get to trust it a little bit more. And so when we think about what scientists do, I'm drawing from the next generation science standards and the Indiana academic standards for what the NGSS calls practices and the Indiana standards call processes, but they're the same set of ideas, the things that students do. And I'm not going to read through the list, but as we go through today's activity, keep in mind what we're hoping learners do in the activities we describe is to practice the practices. We want them to learn how scientists do their job. And hopefully the activity we've got is something that they would engage with pretty readily on a normal basis. Something they're going to find exciting and interesting.
All right. So kind of just to give some background about radio telemetry as a research practice, it's been in use by scientists since the 1960s, so pretty long time. It uses radio signals composed of electromagnetic waves to determine the location of animals and to track their movements, also known as potentially known as migration patterns. So there's definitely a lot of stuff in the science curriculum that you could relate back to this. Using radio telemetry, scientists can determine the range in which individual animals and by population species are capable of migrating to and living in. Using it, we can track the animal continuously and non-invasively. And by that, they mean you don't need to continuously bug the animal. Like, you don't have to constantly capture it in a cage or track it or anything like that. Like, once it has the transmitter on it, it's good to go. You don't need to bother it again. Some telemetry devices can also provide information about the health of the animal, including its heartbeat, its respiration rates, and in the case of birds, their wing beat frequency, which can be really cool to learn more about how birds fly versus how they fly, like when they glide versus flapping their wings. I know there's more technical terms for that, but I'm a plant person, so I'm not entirely sure what ornithologists call all that. But there's a lot of really cool stuff to learn from how frequently they beat their wing. Tom, can you click the slide?
Sure.
So there's a fun comic on here if you guys want to read it. But shown here is a researcher, probably a grad student or someone, I'm not really sure, holding up the receiver of a telemetry device in the field. Telemetry equipment exists for a wide range of animals, invertebrates, birds, mammals, fish, and more. Limitations of telemetry do exist, just like any other kind of technology. The primary limitation is the size of the transmitter or the device that's put onto the animal for tracking. Research has shown that transmitters should not exceed 2 to 5% of the body weight of the animal in question. So as you can imagine, a deer or a bear or something can have a pretty decent sized battery on its transmitter. It's a large animal, it has a lot of weight to spare, whereas something like a tiny bird or a bat needs a really, really tiny transmitter. The smaller the battery, the lighter the transmitter, but also the shorter its battery life. This means that researchers can only get data on the animal for a limited period of time and from limited distances. Smaller the transmitter, its radio waves can't reach as far. And so once the animal's out of range or its battery dies, no more data. Can you click it again? So radio telemetry is a really popular research technique that's often highlighted in media about wildlife research because it's kind of that flashy, cool thing, including in the screenshot on the left from the show Wild Kingdom, which started in 1963, which I know nothing about, but Tom was inspired by it when he first started watching it. I watched part of a YouTube video, but I didn't get very far because I just didn't have time. So got to catch up on that. It's also often highlighted in research of more high-profile animals like elephants, but it's used for animals close to home in Indiana as well.
Part of the reason I threw in the Wild Kingdom reference, that was the thing as a kid. I used to watch that show religiously, and one of the things growing up I said someday I want to do is the radio telemetry kind of studies they showed. So that's part of the reason why I'm a biologist. And I think there's a lot of other kids that see things like this on TV and think, wow, I'd love to do that.
And Javin says the same. And I think we all kind of had something in our lives that made us think, this is what I want to do. For me, it was a complete reversal of everything I grew up with because I'm from an inner city Philadelphia, and not having any plants or anything around me was like, all right, I'm going that way, as far away from everything I've learned so far as possible. Oh, we lost someone. Oh, hopefully they come back. But yeah, so like I was saying, radio telemetry is used very close to home as well. It's been used to study a lot of species in Indiana, including the ones that are seen on the screen. On the screen are deer, some sort of bat, an eastern box turtle, a songbird. I think those are geese feet, and I honestly don't know the bird on the top right, Tom.
Ah, it's a sandhill crane, and those are the legs of a sandhill crane in that one on the bottom.
Oh, okay.
And the bird is a cerulean warbler. The pictures of the bird and the bat were actually taken by researchers at Ball State. So,
okay.
Those are some current active research projects that are going on here
Very
in Indiana.
In addition to the ones on the screen, river otters, lake sturgeon, timber rattlesnake, and a lot of other species are currently being researched in Indiana with radio telemetry. The type of transmitter and the range of the project it does vary on the species in question. For example, you can see in the photo the deer is wearing a radio collar, which again works really well since they are large animals. It doesn't work for the smaller animals quite so much. For things like box turtles, the transmitter can be glued onto their shell. For snakes and fish, it could actually be surgically embedded in the animal, which again is why those transmitters especially have to be very, very small. Ankle monitors can work well for sandhill cranes, but the cerulean warbler and other songbirds, they're actually going to be either glue the transmitter to its back or make it honestly like a tiny backpack around it that doesn't restrict its movement, which is just the cutest thing in the world to me.
Yep, the cerulean warblers have little elastic straps. One goes around each leg with the transmitter up on its back and the antenna hanging off the tail. So, interesting project. The bats, they actually glue them on.
That little guy does not look super thrilled about it, but he'll be fine. So here's a bit of the basics of radio telemetry. There's really only three parts. It's the transmitter, or the part that's worn by the animal, the radio antenna, which is the part that receives the signal, or I'm sorry, the transmitter, the receiver, and the antenna. The receiver is what receives the signal, and the antenna is what picks up the signal. And the antenna transforms the radio signals into a beeping sound so that you can actually, and Tom's holding one up right now, because electromagnetic waves are otherwise silent and invisible, so it has to be converted into something we can actually comprehend. And beeping sounds work. Also, that's just a really cool photo of some sort of large sea turtle with a transmitter glued on its back.
The picture on the lower left is the transmitter. In working on one of our books, we worked with sea turtles, and the researchers there showed us one of the transmitters, and they actually use Bondo, the epoxy used to repair a dent in the car, and glue it to the shell of the turtle. And that's looks like a loggerhead turtle. I happened to be there on one of the days they were releasing one where they had stuck one of these on it. So, very interesting projects.
So just kind of the general concept of how this works. So like we said, there's different ways of attaching the transmitter. It can be a collar, a backpack, or glued on, or surgically implanted. But once it's attached, the animal is released back into the wild. They try to do it as low stress as possible. If needed, the animal is put under anesthesia. Otherwise, it's just captured, it's thrown on, and then they are let go again. From there, the researchers will periodically search for the animal, depending on what the needs of their project are. They'll tune the receiver to the correct frequency, and they'll sweep the antenna to find the direction of the transmitter. Once the direction is located, the researchers can follow that direction, and the receiver will either be louder or more frequently, or both, as it's moved closer to the transmitter. So it's really just providing directionality. It isn't finding it directly for you. It doesn't replace visual tracking of the animal. It just helps you. So it's a tool to aid in the job. It isn't doing the science for you. And back to Tom.
So that's kind of a quick run through of how the radio telemetry works. What we want to spend most of our time talking about is a learning activity, and this is one I've done in about 3 different settings so far. The one we'll be showing you is a teacher workshop that I do at the Indianapolis Zoo, and for the last 3 years, part of that is to help have those teachers do the kind of radio telemetry they learned about as we talked about a few different species. Last summer, the theme was the elephants, and we didn't have it at the summer workshop, but I've gotten to hold one of the transmitter collars they put on an elephant. It looks like a yoke for an ox, but it's huge. And we take the teachers out and have them simulate an activity where they're doing research using radio telemetry as a tool. So the goal is to engage the learners in some real science practices, something that's authentic, to help teach the public, and most of our participants at the zoo are not scientists. Some of them are science teachers, but some are from other subjects, and elementary teachers, preschool teachers. And we want them to see how scientists collect the evidence and use that as the basis for claims that they make. So hopefully build some trust in what scientists tell them. And we also want them to see what some of the difficulties are in doing this kind of research, so they understand why sometimes it's hard to have immediate data to say here's what the answer is. The device that we'll be talking about, this the device in the picture, it's called the beacon. This is a transmitter. It's actually the same kind of transmitter you would put on wildlife, but it's mounted in an old flashlight body, because normally if you have a regular wildlife transmitter, it's got a battery built in. You have to solder it to activate it, and once you do that, when the battery's done, you throw away the device. This is reusable. It's got a rechargeable battery in it. You can turn the battery off. There's a string with a small magnet on it. I'm going to try to get that up here close enough you can see it. And on the body, a spot where you put this, and that turns the beeper on. And if you want to turn it off, you just remove that magnet from that spot so you can save the battery. It makes it a much more reusable, cost-effective way to set this up. And you can see the species that we worked with for this study. What we ended up doing at the botanical gardens at the zoo is I brought some stuffed animals, we tied these transmitters on, and we hid them around the botanical gardens. And the teacher's job, well, we'll talk to you about this in just a moment. Let me flip slides. Their goal is to find 3 of these animals, each one with a different frequency on its collar, and to record observations of the habitat. Scientists don't use transmitters just to find the animal. They use it to find the animal so they can collect data. So I think that recording observations is an important part. We divided our teachers into 3 different groups, and each group would find the animals, record observations, and post it on a poster in the classroom. And between sessions, we'd move those animals. The most difficult part for me mentally is trying to figure out, okay, what's the pattern going to be for this animal this year? And we'll put them in different places that have certain similar characteristics. So for instance, the Velcro gibbon, so-called because of the weird characteristic of its hands, tend to be found above ground a certain height, usually on a tree or on a trellis or something of that sort. And by doing observations and looking at multiple observations by multiple groups, hopefully they see the patterns. That's the goal, the learning goal for the activity. Okay. We're going to take a look at some. I want to come back to this slide in a little bit. Oh, you have some Velcro gibbons as well? Okay. Actually, one of the groundskeepers, when I was putting this, our group was out there, said, "What are you guys looking for?" I said, "There's a gibbon out here." And they said, "There's no gibbons here." And I said, "There's a Velcro gibbon." So the keepers, or the groundskeepers, were a little bit baffled by it. I want to go ahead and show this video. And I think I have this set up so you'll all be able to hear the audio that shows a little bit about this, and then we'll go back to that previous slide to talk about what some of the key elements of the learning activity were. So let me find my mouse here. Can you hear it okay?
Yeah, I can hold the thingy winger.
Good deal.
You hold the big antenna winger finger. And I still have your pen there.
This is the beginning of the activity.
249 is on. Turning the gain.
They're told what frequency the animal has. That's the beeping sound you hear.
That's a good strong signal.
That is a strong.
Nope.
This, by the way, is a pygmy rhino.
Yeah, turn your gain up a little bit as you go. Now try sweeping again.
That voice sounds weird. That's me, but it doesn't sound like me because I sped up the video a little bit to shorten it.
Hold on, let's sweep again here. Oh, right now I'm getting 8s that way.
Now keep in mind, most of the teachers come in thinking that all this does is tell you exactly where the animal is. You follow the beeper. It only tells them direction.
I have it written on mine. Predicted habitat.
Funny area under thing. This is what I wrote.
We pumped the zoo full of helium
Water
during
and safe.
the conference.
Alright.
Oh, hold on. Oh, it can.
And it's a trial and error thing.
Either that way
They'll
or
search
mine.
for it. They get close to it. They have to stop and sweep again. You can see we've got 2 groups nearby.
It's like it goes from 0 to 10.
To give you a little hint, the pygmy rhino lives on the other side of that hedge.
You don't want to-
The woman in the blue shirt is a returning participant. She has experience doing this, and so I told her, your job is to manage your group, but let somebody else handle the equipment. You can give them advice, but don't tell them everything about how to do it. She did a wonderful job of being the coach.
See how this dial moves? Sort of watch like as you turn, see how the highest peak.
ID, the antenna and receivers are separate purchases. We got some slides later where I'll tell you some sources where you can look for some of these kinds of tools, including a slightly cheaper version of one of them.
This thing gets heavy after all that it's used. Oh, thank God.
And there they found the blue-mouthed frog. Here's the blue-mouthed frog. It's the giant blue-mouthed frog, not just any blue-mouthed frog. That summer, it always lived underneath benches. And then they switch frequencies, and they start looking in another area very quickly. The nice thing about the botanical garden is there are several different areas, and we can hide these animals in different places. I've done the same thing at Minnetrista in the woods around one of the Ball Brother family homes, and did that with young kids for an activity we did about birds. Okay, watch this cement wall they just walked past. All of a sudden their signal got weaker. They had walked right past it. And I can tell you from having done some of this in the field in northern Indiana with 2 kinds of turtles and some rattlesnakes, that is a very realistic picture of how it happens in the field. You get kind of close, you walk right past, the signal goes down, you turn around, pretty soon you realize you were standing right next to it. Okay? So, some of the key issues here. I'm a big believer in the idea that if I want my students to learn how to do real science, like I said, I want them to do what scientists do. They need a question that they're answering. In this case, what habitat does each of the species prefer? When I say hands-on trial and error with the technology, I kind of give them an idea of how it works, but they have to have a little bit of failure before they really figure out how the process works. They have to learn to play with the gain and the volume and try to figure out when they're sweeping, what does the signal tell us. When they sweep and point with an antenna, if they get a strong signal, it means it's either straight ahead of them or straight behind them. So it is possible for your learners to walk the wrong direction. And it's difficult as a teacher to let them fail a little bit, but that's how they learn how to do this. It's how I learned how to do it in the field. And then again, following up with, once they find the animal, they need to do some observations. So they're not only using technology, which is one of the practices, they are doing observations, a type of data collection. They're using the data to look for kinds of patterns that they see. They also have to share data with other scientists, which is pretty typical, especially in environmental studies. And then they're interpreting what they saw in the data to see what patterns were there. And then I also asked them to do some reflections about the challenges, like, well, how would this be harder if it was on a live animal that flies around in the botanical garden while they're doing their study? So that gives you an idea. Heidi, you had asked about, do you buy antennas and receivers separately? I do want to give you some ideas about some resources. And Erica, can you post some of the links that we had collected? We're going to post links to some of these companies. I got this list from Dr. Tim Carter. He's the Batman here at Ball State. He does research on bats using radio telemetry. He also manages some studies that look at white-tailed deer, and he teaches our students how to use this. The equipment I showed you, we borrowed from him. And he said, here are the 3 vendors that he trusts most. Wildlife Materials is where the equipment he uses came from. And when I say the equipment, we're talking about a transmitter, or I'm sorry, a receiver. This receiver and the antenna, the receiver's kind of more on the expensive high end because he needs something that has a lot of power to pick up a signal from a tiny little bat transmitter. ATS, another company that has similar kinds of equipment. You can buy transmitters from them, but most of these are receivers and antenna. Telonix is another company, and again, you've got some information posted in here, including some prices. The transmitters, I've got a slide where I'm showing what I found as some of the cheaper ones. The TRX-3S, the one I showed you uses crystal radio, which is more expensive. The TRX-3S is an electronic solid state, which is cheaper but has less range. But for most environmental sites, this would work great. It's not the cheapest equipment, but if you get one of these receivers and one of these antenna, you could do quite a bit of learning activities with this. The receivers or the transmitters are usually sold separately, and they're not cheap. Some of the transmitters I put up on here, talking 200, 180 for a small one. The problem with that is you buy it, you use it till the battery's dead, and then it's done. Okay. This is an option that I learned through the zoo. It's a device called a locator. It is designed to have a little collar tag size transmitter that you can see at the bottom of the picture with a battery that you can replace. The goal is put this on your cat's collar, and if the cat gets away, you can use it to find out where your cat went. But it also works really well as this radio telemetry equipment. The handheld transmitter on the picture, the antenna wings are folded up. You fold those out. It's a bigger transmitter. It's got the same kind of dials on it. You can set frequencies, and you can buy multiple transmitters, each with a slightly different frequency, so that you can tune them in and use them as multiple animals that you could put out in the woods. I have used these at the zoo. They work really well. I think they're a little easier to use, a little bit easier to store because they fold up nice and small. The beep is nice and loud. The range is not as good, but for most of our settings, that wouldn't be a problem. Anywhere where schools can rent or pay for the program. Another idea that we're getting ready to talk about. Okay. Yeah, I know for schools and even nature centers, this may not be within the price range. By the way, I had planned this workshop. Then when we did our summer workshop, my teachers went online and were looking at this. Last year at this time, the locator cost about $220. And apparently it's been popular enough they doubled their price. So, Eric, I'm going to hand this back to you and let you talk about the field station, and we'll talk about some opportunities where we might be able to help you with these activities.
Yeah, so like Jessica said when she introduced us, I'm the environmental educator at Ball State University. I don't really teach the Ball State students necessarily, although I do sometimes. Mostly I work with Ball State students to provide tours of our properties as needed, or I provide opportunities for them to interact with the public. But otherwise, the bulk of my job is with the public, with community members, and with pre-K through 12th grade students. And I am providing standards-based environmental education on pretty much any topic I am asked for, as long as it is at least remotely related to the environment. I do this now because of COVID. I do it virtually as well, but normally I do it on our properties. We have 6 properties that are part of the field station at Ball State. 5 of them are accessed by permission only, and they're throughout Muncie area and throughout Delaware County. The one that is open to the public year-round, and we most often use for field trips for school groups, is on campus, and it's our Christie Woods property, which is about 17 acres, and it includes deciduous hardwood forest that is just over 100 years old because it was restored the same year that Ball State was founded. We also have a small prairie, which also has a pond in it, which in just under a year from now, it will be renovated into a wetland, because right now the pond is just kind of choked with cattails and isn't very helpful. We also have our greenhouses on campus. We have the Renard Orchid Greenhouse, which is the largest college-owned orchid collection in the country, with over 2,000 orchids and over 3,000 plants total, including a lot of other tropical plants like bananas and coffee and chocolate. And we have some animal representatives like poison dart frogs and our turtles. And the Teaching and Research Greenhouse, which has a little bit of everything from all over the world. It is an awesome collection. There's stuff from the desert, stuff from the tropics, and pretty much everywhere in between. We offer programs at all of these. Yes, the public can go to the greenhouses as well as Christie Woods, and I'll post links to our website in just a sec. We changed our hours a little bit because of COVID. The Orchid Greenhouse is open 11 to 4 Monday to Friday, and on select Saturdays. The Teaching and Research Greenhouse and Christie Woods are open around like 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday and 10 to 3 on Saturday. This is all on our website, and we have social media for both Christie Woods and the Orchid Greenhouse. I post lots of cute animal and plant pictures and videos. I am shamelessly always searching for followers. So we have lots of cool stuff. And in addition to providing programs virtually or on our properties, I also went to other locations in non-COVID times. Right now, most schools aren't allowing visitors, so that doesn't work so much right now. But in the past, I have gone to classrooms or community centers to provide programs directly, especially for groups who can't afford the travel. And right now, everything we do is free. Before COVID hit, we were considering for longer distances to charge a small traveling fee to basically cover gas. And then COVID hit and all those plans went out the window. So we haven't actually done that yet, but eventually we want to do that again. And on the screen, you can see pictures of some of the programs I've done. With preschoolers, the top left photo and the far right photo are a nature preschool that I work with a lot. Henry in the top left is holding a leopard frog he caught. And the young girl on the right, who's unfortunately I lost her name, she is exploring our creek on our Cooper Farm property, which is accessible by permission. The other photos, the bottom left is a Inspire Academy group exploring the Orchid Greenhouse, and there's a young boy looking over our bridge at our turtles in the pond. Next to that is our kids club that we run once a month called Wildlife Warriors, and in that meeting we were learning about turtles, so they got to see and hold them up close. She is holding Tess, who is very angry at being held, but she'll get over it. And then the last photo is another school group. They were learning about frogs up close and personal. They got to observe different native tree frogs, toads, and a couple others at their tables and pass them around. So we do a lot of cool stuff. And I think where we're getting at is potentially doing this telemetry program in the future. So I'm gonna turn it back to Tom.
One of the things to add to this, I asked Tim Carter a couple days ago, this is the bat professor, what he thought of the idea if a nature center or a state park or a school wants to have a program about the radio telemetry. He said, oh, I would love to do that. I enjoy teaching that. I've got a lot of experience doing it. Yes, we would go out and do some visits. I also tend to do some outreach activities. Erica just posted in the chat some links to the websites where if you are interested in a program that we could offer either on our site or at your site, those are places to go to contact us, and we can work on planning some things. And as Taryn, you asked about places where you can pay for the program. Transportation is the only thing you would have to pay for, either to come to us or maybe help us come to you, but that's pretty minimal fees. So our goal is to help get this word out. Dr. Carter also asked me for the link for the locator. I think he wants to find some money to buy those, so we would have a couple of them around. So along with this, in the fall we hope to institute a brand new minor at the university for environmental education. The goal being to have some of our natural resources and environmental management students and biology students and anybody else that thinks they might want a job working at a state park or a nature center or a zoo or anything where they're doing public education about the environment. We want to help give them some training on how to do that well. Part of that would have a course where they need a practicum. So we're looking for partners who would host basically a student environmental educator, an intern who could help do some programs, and this is one of the things we would love to have some of those students go and do. Our students love doing this radio telemetry stuff. It's an exciting activity to do.
And we've done a lot of smaller versions even without the minor. For example, we have an interpretation class that's offered I think it's every other year, because I don't think she offered it this year. But last year they helped me create educational content mainly for our Halloween program, because we do a Magic School Bus program every year, because I kind of had the costume for Miss Frizzle before they hired me. So I said, we're doing this. But they helped me create stuff so we could do stuff outside in Christie Woods as well as inside the greenhouse. And one of the activities that I used again this year was a student actually designed bat masks of native bat species, which are available to download at the second link that I posted a second ago, along with a bunch of other content that is free to download, free to use. I just ask people to please fill out my survey and tell me you're using my stuff so I can say, hey, people are using my stuff. Don't fire me. Not that I'm at risk of being fired, but hey. But yeah, so we have lots of cool stuff like those native bat masks, and it's just opportunities for the students to get more experience, because if you're involved in science, you need to know how to talk to people. And if you can't explain your science to a 5-year-old, you don't know your science. So it's just more experience for things like that.
Heidi, I jotted down your email address. I will pass this on to our environmental team, which, by the way, I'm part of that committee. I don't teach in NREM, but I desperately want to teach classes connected to this environmental ed program. And Erica's job will be here because she's really good at what she does. But another connection, this is shameless promotion on my part, my Conservation Tales book series. It's produced by students and a colleague of mine in the School of Art. We work together. Our books talk about real scientists who do real wildlife research, and 5 of the books that we've covered include some examples of researchers who use radio telemetry. So our books on cerulean warblers and bats that were done here in Indiana, manatees, sea turtles, elephants. We're getting ready to do 2 new books next semester about Asian carp and monarch butterflies, so we'll be adding to our Midwest series. There's a link on here if you're interested in going to see some of that. But that's the main information we have. And I want to, oh, this is one of the other things we get to do. If you want to come to our Conservation Educator Academy, you get up close and personal with some fun animals. But I want to open this up to any questions that any of you have. If you want to unmute and ask a question, please feel free to do so. We'd love to make this more of a discussion now.
And we don't bite.
Hey, thanks so much. This is awesome. I love it. Has anybody taken it to the next level and not just put them on stuffed animals, but real animals? Maybe working with the university or doing anything like that with people who are doing the real research and collecting that data?
We have it in terms of like having the public observe it. I know like Dr. Islam, the ornithologist here, he will let the public come and watch his bird banding, which doesn't necessarily include the transmitters, but it does include capturing the birds in the mist nets and putting identification anklets on them. Pre-COVID, people were welcome. It was advertised. Right now, it's just restricted to him and his student researchers. Sure. I would be super stoked to be able to pull that off one day, but I don't think we've done that here yet. No.
I haven't heard of it happening. I suppose if we had students that wanted to do something like a science fair project related to it, we would work with students in that kind of a setting. And there may be opportunities to help students get some equipment and a grant if they want to try something like this on their own. Part of the trick with it, with the cerulean warblers, that little transmitter with the little elastic band harness, the battery in that lasts about 7 days.
Oh, man.
And you turn the bird loose, and when it goes out, those elastic bands are designed to decay in a little bit less than 7 days, so that hopefully it'll drop to the ground and you can find it with the transmitter. But imagine one of those laying out in the woods.
Sure.
We're talking a $180 transmitter that's probably going to be thrown away in a week. So the time frame for that is difficult. Deer are a little easier because you can put a battery pack with it, but there are some interesting issues with that make it difficult.
Sure. Thanks.
First time I could do a telemetry program with children, I could easily do a short version of that in about an hour. That activity we showed you at the zoo, we spend about an hour and a half doing that. And they're looking at 3 different species that they're going and finding. And there's some discussion before and some discussion afterwards, but it doesn't have to be a huge long length of time.
I think it would also be maybe the amount of like pre and post discussion, like before and after the field trip or visitation as well. Like it's really as much as you would want to do with it with your class. Yes.
And probably what I would do if I was doing a pre is to talk about, here are our species, here's what we're going to do, show them the study and have them make some predictions and hypotheses beforehand, plan out how they're going to collect the data. Then you do the hands-on activity outdoors. And it can be done in almost any setting. You could do this indoors if you had to, although it's always more fun outside. And go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I've finished up. I'll ask in a sec.
I've even thought about with the zoo putting the transmitter on somebody that's walking around the zoo, and the goal is to find out who's got the transmitter. So my goal is to slip it in somebody's baby stroller and not tell them about it. But Taryn, you had a question then.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, this would be my first choice to do the actual transmitter and everything. But with this year and no budget, I have very limitations. But I do have iPads per kid. So is there anything like that you can do that would kind of do more of a mock? I know it's not exact, and I would really prefer to do exact, but is there something else that, do you know of any apps or anything that would give us something like a similar feel to it?
I don't know of any, but I honestly haven't looked for that. So there might be something out there. I do know that there are other pet tracking devices that you can get that you can use with a smartphone. and I don't know what the cost on those is. You go to some of the websites where you might find that. It doesn't come right out and tell you here's what the price is, but it'd be like a dog collar, and you can track it with your
They
smartphone.
make those, they're called tiles, and you can put them on your keys or your wallet or your dog collar, and yeah, it has an app on your phone to help you track it down. So like, I love the idea of like, whether it's the tiles thing or the transmitter or something, going back to Jabin's idea of using like a live animal. Our goal in about 2 years, we are expanding and building an expansion to the greenhouse as well as a classroom, and I am super stoked to have space to have live animals in the classroom. I think it would be awesome to just like stick a transmitter in like the tank of an animal and have the kids roam around, get so confused, and they finally find it. It was in the classroom all along, or just outside of an animal that we could easily like get again. Like, can't really use a bird because once they're gone, but maybe a turtle or something that like we can easily hunt down and take that tracker back off so we can reuse it, kind of thing. I think that would be really cool.
A turtle would work. You could find a turtle in a pond, although I did a summer internship with turtles and rattlesnakes, and you end up about chest deep in the pond looking for your turtles. But
wouldn't be the first time for me.
Yeah.
One thing that we also do, which is kind of, it's not telemetry, but it's related. It's back to one of the links I posted to our environmental education resources website. One of the activities I have on there is called Who Lives in Indiana, and it's for 5th to 8th graders, but it can certainly be modified. It's free to download. Also, am more than happy to present it virtually in a classroom or in person when COVID is finally over. But I used footage from motion sensor cameras that I set up on our properties to capture what wildlife is around when humans are not around. So it gives you a different way of tracking, which is still a super important way that researchers gain data about wildlife, because again, you don't want to do things that are too invasive, because the more you bother the animal, the more stressed out it is, and that's not really typical behavior. Whereas if you're not around, whether it's through the tracker or through the motion camera, they're going to act the way they would normally act. And that is an activity on there that has a lot of cool stuff you can do in the classroom as well. And maybe we can link these together in the future.
Our Conservation Tales page, if you're interested in that, we've also got some online learning activities that are, I selected some of the ones we have in our books and posted them in a free area called the e-learning corner, and some of them relate to the web, the trail cams, and to the radio transmitters. There's one where they can go look at data from sea turtles or manatees. It's real data. It's not current data because they don't want poachers finding the animals, but they will find them. Heidi mentioned the Butler Urban Project. One of our Conservation Tales activities links to the Butler trail cam, our webcam. That's not the right term. The trail cam activity, where the kids can go look at some actual trail cam pictures and try to identify the animals. So yes, I'm familiar with that Butler one. They actually presented the first summer we were doing the telemetry thing at our zoo project. So
there's also the website called Zooniverse, which is a free website where researchers can post projects they need citizen science help with. And one or two, I know there's the Chicago Urban Wildlife Watch on there, where you go on and you actually identify what you see on their trail cams throughout the city. I believe there's one for Michigan as well. I don't think Butler's on there, because I don't know if they use citizen science.
Yeah, Butler's not on that one yet, but the Chicago one is a huge project.
It's so much fun, and I've used it with my kiddos, and it's citizen science link in my Who Lives in Indiana activity. It's not technically in Indiana, but it's still in Midwest, so I called it good enough. But there are things like that on there as well as a bunch of other activities. There are also websites online. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but I know I've looked at them in the past, where you can observe animals that have telemetry trackers on them. One that I know of is a shark one, where you can actually see the sharks swimming around because they have the trackers embedded in them or on them in some way. So you can observe it. You're not necessarily doing
it with a camera.
Yeah. Or you see it as like, it's like a little icon like booping around because the live animal swimming around somewhere. So it's almost like your car on your GPS. So there are things like that as well.
Other questions?
Also, that elephant was very fun to pet. Whatever I thought an elephant would feel like, it wasn't that, but it was cool.
I don't see any names on here that have been to our Conservation Educator Academy before, but It was originally set up for K through 12, but we've expanded that out, and we've had some people who do informal education. If any of you are interested in doing that, it's a summer workshop for 4 days at the zoo. We do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. You get to talk to keepers and researchers at the zoo, and it's a neat experience. So yes, shameless pitches for other programs we do. So. Any questions about the technology or the process? Taryn, I'm glad it was helpful. And Taryn, where is it where do you teach?
Nobles.
Oh, in Noblesville. Okay.
You're not that far away. We are more than willing to travel to Noblesville or have you guys come to us, or again, anything virtual. We're pretty flexible because it's our job and it's a lot of fun.
This is the fun stuff I get to do in my job. I enjoy doing it.
This is why my grandmother is convinced I just get paid to have fun.
Jabin, glad you thought it was good. We'll hang out here in case anybody else has any other questions, I guess. We've got a few more minutes still in our session. If you guys want to ask questions about the antenna or the I really wish we could do this hands-on and let you experience it yourself. The equipment we've been showing you, the transmitter, the antenna, that's not made up material. This is the actual stuff the researchers use when they go down to Brown County and they track deer and bats and birds, and any research they do, they are using this equipment. And yeah, that's the stuff we would take out to a school with you, with a group like this.
Do you know if the Conservation Academy is going to go off this summer, or when are you guys going to make a decision about that?
It is going to happen.
Okay.
The week of June 21st, it's a Monday through Thursday, and the dates are slipping my mind right off the numbers, but it's around the 21st of June. There's a website at the zoo where you could put your name on the list if you're interested in it. We usually in February will start the official sign up for it. They've got a brand new exhibit that they are in the process of constructing right now for crocodiles and alligators. That will be our theme. But we always branch out and do some other things. We always go to see one of the learning activities with the orangutans and do some behind the scenes stuff to find out a little bit more about what science is happening at the zoo, and get you a chance to meet a few animals up close through some of their animal chats and talk with keepers, and plan an inquiry-based science lesson based on some of the things you saw while we were there.
All right, well, thank you. If you guys have, I know Taryn has one more question. I'm gonna kind of let you know what is coming next, and I'm gonna let them get to that. So at 10:15, you guys have a couple choices of middle school students in the river, literally, job searches and interview tips and tricks with Jen, cultivating and a following, building a volunteer program that sticks. I love that Caitlin's doing this because I volunteer under her. And then MBECE and ECEE statewide meeting with Carlos. So there's some good options at 10:15 to do that. So, and just a kind of reminder that this is being recorded. It will be up on, it'll get on the Hoover site probably this weekend sometime, and it'll be there to watch for the next year. So also on the agenda, if you click on the session and you go down towards the bottom, there's going to be a button that says rate session. This is our evaluation. So please go in and rate the session. It does give you points on the leaderboard for the weekend. There are prizes for that. But also, you know, with this one, we're like, hey, this is awesome. You know, when they ask, hey, have you done telemetry? And you're going, not yet, question mark, because it's pretty cool. So one of the comments you may put in there is, hey, bring the session back and when we meet in person, because we want to see this. So
would love to do this as a hands-on. Like I said, yeah. That's the most fun way to do it.
Yep, and we absolutely look at those evaluations when we were planning the next year. We're like, hey, invite this person back, so we make sure we get touch with them and bringing them into the program. So, but thank you so much. I'm also going to make sure that you guys have had a lot of links in this chat, so we'll make sure we get that saved and also posted. So thank you a ton, Tom and Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Taryn, if you send me an email, I will make sure we get you some more information about all of our programs as well. So, but we'll work on updating stuff on the page.
All right. Well, thank you, and we'll see you at 10:15 in your next sessions.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.